Bob. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired, and you do not sound tired. Like, how are you doing it?
Ron, I'm lucky to do what I do. You know what?
Jeez. Yeah, and that's true. But Bob, listen, I've always heard people say I never worked a day in my life, where we sit and we talk for a living and all that, and people will say I watch hockey for a living, but I know better. There's a little bit of a sword of Damocles over everyone all the time to have something, and I really enjoyed even the Texters and Callers show yesterday. I think that was yesterday.
Yes.
Was tremendous. So I kind of agreed. I remember there was a guy named Hodgie. I don't think it was Dave Hodge, but Hodgie was saying that
Hodgie's sharp, man. He's a smart guy.
He was great. He said that the refereeing had the effect of neutralizing Kane. Once he had a couple of penalties and was afraid to throw his weight around anymore.
That's interesting.
And so he was good on that. David's. I do agree the reffing wasn't great if you're the Oilers. There was it seemed like the sticks. They always caught the high sticks. Well, but I also like your losers lament. What's the point of it? Florida was a hell
They
of
were
a
better.
Here's one of the things I was thinking about, because you can frame everything a million ways, but it was kind of a devil you know situation where the two of the real key guys, and I agreed with you, Brad Marchand's double OT winner, so certainly Louis would be all over, what Marchand does so great, and, the Oilers would be able to go to him for intel, but the two devils they know best, Sam Reinhart, of course, played for Chris Knobloch in Kootenay, and Sam Bennett, boyhood friend of Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
So these guys that were killing the Oilers are guys that are not strangers to the captain and the coach. That was really interesting.
That's a great point by you. I used to, as you know, worked up north and was actually once reasonably fit. And I'd listen to Dan Taylor or Don
Taylor, for sure.
Don Taylor. I watched Don Taylor tonight and listened to Dan Russell on CKNW. And I did, I actually developed a greater. It was when the Canucks, 92, 93, I guess 93, 94, 94, 95, those 2 years. And those were good years for the Vancouver organization. They ended up in the final. And anyways, when you do a job like that, or one year I went up and tried to work on a service rig, and I was crappy at it, right? And that's hard work. So I used to say to Louis all the time, because I drive him home, Ron, when we land during the regular season, and it'd be like 2 a.m. This is when the show was noon to 2. He goes, "Are you doing the show today?" And this would be like at 3:30 in the morning. I go, "Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's part of my job." And this was when the Oilers were winning 1 out of 21 games. Right. So yesterday to land, fly back on the team plane, knowing how devastated the players were and frustrated with how it concluded. But to know that there's way worse things than to go and talk on the air about the Edmonton Oilers Hockey Club with a passionate fan base that cares and loves what the team. Of course I'm going to do this show. And energy. I got to have energy, Ron. Seriously.
Yep.
From September the 2nd or 3rd every year straight through to July 3rd or 4th. Once we get through the first couple of days of free agency, I'm working those 10 months. That's all. And then I'm still going to do another month's worth of shows in the summer, but I'm working 10 months straight every year. Because you know why? Because there's lots of other guys in Edmonton that know lots about hockey that would love to trade places, and they know their stuff. So I've never lost sight of that. It doesn't make me more virtuous or a better guy. It just makes me luckier.
No, but you have my respect for sounding as good as you did coming off the plane. I've got my boarding pass here for the charter back up to Edmonton for Game 7. That didn't happen, but I'll just hang on to that as a nice keepsake. Another good run. We were, Bob, I know the Florida Panthers were the better team in the end. As you said, I think one of the days, 6 games, maybe flattered Edmonton a touch.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but I still had a feeling they could win. I really, you just will always have that feeling when you and part of it was going to their practices, and this is Kevin BX and I were saying on the air, when you watch them flying out there, you think, who could skate with these guys? But Forsling could. That was the one thing, he found his game. He wasn't great early in the playoffs. They were relying more on Mikkola and Seth Jones, who was a great pickup. It was funny, and you mentioned how Zito's good. I mean, they got Marchand, they got Seth Jones, they had that Vitek Vanacek. They brought him in from San Jose at the trade deadline, and he kind of played a role. It was
he shouldn't have.
He shouldn't have, though. That's
Stuart
right.
Skinner. If I was Stuart Skinner, I would have looked at him and said, "You know what? You should move.
Yeah.
Or next year we're going to have a discussion, and it's not going to go well for you.
And Pickard came over, but you're right about that.
And then the back half of that is, if you have a job in the NHL next season, because I've seen another player do that, and it was quite ironic because he did it in Los Angeles to a guy. And I was a little surprised the comment was made. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was made after a game, and he thought the guy took advantage of the fact that he was out of the lineup with something. And he said to the player, he said, hey, we're going next time we play if you're still on the team and they haven't traded you or if Todd's healthy scratched you that night. It was really funny stuff. So, it was, like one of those. Ron, stuff was getting set out there between these two teams. You know that. There was some stuff that was, hey, it's 2 years in a row in the Stanley Cup Final. All's fair in love and war, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I kind of like, obviously the penalty killing was terrible this year. I don't know what happened. So that was a real Achilles heel for the Oilers. But, having said that, after they lost the first two games, and we'd made this point, and when everybody points back to losing Broberg and Holloway and on, I mean, that's all well, I understand it, but I do think this team, with Hyman and Ekholm healthy, was actually more than enough to win the Stanley Cup this year. They absolutely blitzed, Vegas and Dallas, and they took care of LA once they got rolling. So it wasn't that they were terrible. It's just that, especially in this final, they couldn't get a lead. They had the lead in game one, and that's it. Every game they lost the lead right away, and so they were chasing the game a little bit. And it wasn't just the opening goals. In game 6, Reinhart scores 5 minutes in, and Matthew Tkachuk in the final minute of the first. Those late goals in the first period were bizarre. Sam Bennett in game 5 in the final 2 minutes. And game 4, Lundell in the final minute. Game 3, they got Brad Marchand opened the scoring, and he had just had the double overtime winner, in game 2. So all these little things you don't want. And then Verhaeghe scored with like 2 and 15 to go in the first period. So that was, for me, whatever the problem was. And it was like everybody had a turn. Like Enmark, I think, was the one guilty on the Verhaeghe, and you don't expect that from him. You expect that's the right guy to be on the ice to get them through to the intermission. But they weren't able to do that for some reason.
They went 13-2 after dropping the first 2 games to LA. They were underdogs against Vegas. They were underdogs against Dallas. Stuart Skinner, for 2 straight years, totally outplayed Jake Ottinger, who's 1B to Connor Hellebuck's 1A for the U.S. Olympic team. But, Ron, here's the hard and fast. Okay, Edmonton outscored Florida 23-18 last year in the Stanley Cup Final. Oilers outscored them 5-1 in special teams. Skinner had a better save percentage than Bob in last year's Stanley Cup Final. So usually, if you win the special teams and the goaltending and playoffs, you win. Well, the Oilers didn't win anything this year. No. Bobrovsky was over 940 save percentage, 5v5. 8-4 were the special teams goals for the Florida Panthers in the series over Edmonton. So they had the goaltending, they had the superior special teams, and they ended up outscoring the Oilers, 28 to, 17. And Edmonton had the lowest save percentage in an NHL Stanley Cup Final in history. It's tough to win that way, and that's. I don't like
switching goalies either. I understand why it was done. It had worked in the LA, it worked in the Vancouver series a year ago, but I've always maintained if you have to flip in the final, it's just like Lindros's best shot, Philadelphia '97. They went away from Hextall after 1 game to Garth Snow, and then right away, everyone's kind of looking over their shoulders, and they're two. I love the tandem, so and they seem to be so good for one another that there was a great shot there of Pickard sort of kneeling next to Skinner at the end. So there's that, but I didn't like when Philadelphia made the swap, and I wasn't crazy about it in this year's playoff. And the other thing, back to what would you do with a problem like Sam Bennett? So McDavid, for him to win the Conn Smythe and then his boyhood friend to win the Conn Smythe this year. But what could they have done with Bennett? And the only thing I could think of is back in '97 when Gretzky and Messier were together in New York and they couldn't handle the Legion of Doom. They put Adam Graves at center. They took him off Messier's line and threw him out to just torment Eric. I don't know if you could have put Evander Kane at center. He's played the position, did his first 4 years in the NHL, but that was, for me, Bennett was just early on a force, and then Marchand became that force. And he wasn't that guy at Four Nations. He was just flying in this final.
Yeah, he was fantastic. The Oilers, I think my biggest disappointment for Edmonton was how the D played.
Yeah.
It was a strength through 2 rounds. Ekholm and Connor McDavid, actually, because we've not heard yet from Stan Bowman and Chris Knobloch, but Connor McDavid saying today it was a groin injury, which, obviously we knew, but you work for the club, you're not going to necessarily, we said it's a core issue. Ekholm came back in. They got knocked off kilter from that. I thought, after watching Florida beat Toronto, I thought Edmonton, I'll be honest, I thought the Oilers would do a better job. They had better puck movers, Ron, handling that fierce forecheck, and instead Florida just got completely healthy and got everybody rolling, and the Oilers couldn't do anything about it.
And I don't know how you felt about they practice so hard, and Florida doesn't. Florida doesn't skate anybody, So, and I know the reason they have to kind of heal up after the heavy hits.
I got 2 or 3 texts from former Oilers players about that. Guys that are with different teams going, who's fingerprints, and I got a pretty good idea. I would have preferred backing off the gas pedal as well. By the way, I just wanted to thank you. That was wonderful what Kevin Bieksa and Kelly Rudy and Elliot Friedman and David Amber and yourself did for us last Thursday. It was a stellar segment.
It was fun, wasn't it? Yeah.
Much appreciated. Did you have any brushes with greatness when you were down in Fort Lauderdale or here in Edmonton during the Stanley Cup Final?
Well, we had Kevin's birthday was the 16th, so we had a really nice night that night. One of the fun nights was when we were staying over on the Lauderdale beach side between games 3 and 4, and we were at Tecado, which is the Oilers' favorite sushi haunt.
Yes.
And so we were there, and Ron Hainsey, who works for the Players Association, came over to say hello, and then we ended up with Marty Walsh. And what was really funny is David Amber was off that night. He went to visit a friend about 6 miles south of Fort Lauderdale. He ended up at a table next to Bill Daly, and we were with Marty Walsh. He came to the cigar bar. Marty doesn't drink, so he was just listening to us. And he was good company, and Ron Hainsey was hilarious. So that was probably my closest brush. I didn't get any news on the CBA, but I will say Craig was with us, Simpson. And Simmer said to Marty, just want to thank you, Marty, for, you've been great. The relations are good. And I just feel like there's been some very good leadership on both sides for the players and everybody getting along. And he says, don't you agree, Ron? And I said, no, I'm with McT. McDavid deserves $50 million a year. You should have seen the look on Marty Walsh's face. That was probably.
I saw MacT today, by the way.
Good.
MacT on Mondays for contract equipment. So.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question.
What did he say? What's MacT saying? Or did you talk to him?
He saw the same thing I did. You have to concede that as the series, something changed after Game 2 in the series, and I just think that they elevated and the Oilers just couldn't match it. And I kind of thought Edmonton lacked a little energy in games 5 and 6.
Right.
And I think they have to reevaluate some of the decisions that were made by the coaching staff and who potentially influenced the decision that was made.
Right.
Okay. Now, I have a hypothetical for you, and I want you to say you've made, and I'm going to throw this out there for the listeners as well to text us on the Ashley Fine Floors text line. So I was also we stayed at the hotel adjacent to Tecado, okay, right there, okay? And I'd gone out with our fantastic shooter that works with us, a guy named Ryan, a.k.a. Mojo. We went to a taco place, El Taquito. It's stellar in Fort Lauderdale. I walked back, and I bumped into 3 Hall of Famers. And the linchpin of the Hall of Famers invited me to go see an NBA Hall of Famer that night, but I'd already made plans with somebody else. So the question I have is, if a couple Hall of Fame hockey players are inviting you to roll with them to go see a Hall of Fame basketball player, do you ditch the person that you made the plans with for 25 minutes later?
No, never.
Right.
It sounds like Wayne was the
Don't
guy.
Comment. No comment.
Because he was back, and my God, I laughed. He's been on the cover of Cigar Aficionado. Wayne and Darren Pang were going to lunch, right? And Wayne had his little baggie of cigars, and they looked so like he's such a perfect guy
Yeah.
down there. So anyway, I know he's back in St. Louis most of the time now, but and that's everybody loves St. Louis. But yeah, it was nice to see Wayne being around for the series. And you got to be with the, one that brought you.
Yeah, 100%.
You'll have plenty of opportunities to see the Hall of Famers.
But not a lot of Hall of Fame basketball players, and this one is incredibly charismatic. But I did stick with my original plans. So there you go. I have not a lot of integrity, but I have a little bit, Ron.
Yes, you do.
All right. Yes. So you looking forward to free agency? What do you think?
Well, I am. I don't do the show, so I'm not studying and thinking about it, but I'll be like anything else. I'll be eager to hear the guys kick around what's going to happen with the Oilers. The Canucks, as you mentioned, they're imploding right now, so that's going to be interesting. And I'll just look to see if there's a move north to some of the talent. Would be nice to see, but
I want to see Vancouver and Calgary back in the playoffs next year. It'd be awesome for Canada. I expect the Oilers to be there, but I want to see Vancouver and Calgary get back there. And you can speak to what it meant in the Eastern Conference to see both Ottawa and Montreal make it on top of the Leafs, who've been a decent team for several years.
Yeah, Steos has done a great job and will continue to do a great job in Ottawa. And as you know, the young D in Montreal is tremendous. So, they're both in a position now where they should be in the playoffs for a while. And I don't think Winnipeg's going anywhere. So, there's that. It's just I am concerned for Vancouver, and obviously Edmonton's got to figure out a way to make that last step. And they'll have that huge story, with McDavid and Judd Moldover's a really, just like you and David were saying, Connor's going to be measured. He's going to say the right things. He's got to see what the negotiation, renders, the CBA negotiation, get the final cap numbers, and then on they go.
All right. Awesome stuff, Ron. Thank you for coming on the show again.
Yeah, great year, Bob. I'll be done now. Solstice tomorrow, but we'll see you in the fall. Can't wait.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much.